Hey, y'all, it's Valentine's Day, and I'm sure you're going to love the news that I am here to share with you. Todd Monken is out as he has accepted the offensive coordinator job with the Baltimore Ravens, and Mike Bobo reportedly will be the Dogs' next offensive coordinator again. So let's take a look back at the career that Todd Monken had for the Dogs. He was a it's over. Ravens will run the North. I hope you mean that it's over for the rest of the AFC and not for Georgia. Dab and fire 1186. Palmer Toms, welcome to the show. Todd Monken is out. Mike Bobo is moving up again. I was just about to kind of look back on the career that Todd Monken had at Georgia, Palmer, and obviously it included 2 national championships. But from your experience covering the team, you saw it up close and personal, and you saw the Todd Monken effect in action, even without a spring to install before that COVID season. Georgia's offense got more explosive each and every year, man.
Yeah, they did. And, obviously, I think this is disappointing news for Georgia fans, but it's a testament to what Todd Monken has done to where he is attracting NFL attention. And it's a testament to what Georgia has done with Todd Monken as its offensive coordinator. What the players have done. I think you look at the way that he developed, we all know the story, walk-on quarterback, buried down the depth chart, to develop him into a, Heisman Trophy contender, says a lot about what Todd Monken is capable of. And that's going to be attractive to teams, NFL teams, college teams, whoever. Georgia had some of its most successful offenses under Todd Monken. And ironically, the ones that were, equally as successful or comparable were under Mike Bobo. Now, granted, I think that was a different era of football. And, I would be surprised if we're seeing a lot of the, 2014 concepts being run in 2023, 9 years after the fact. But very, big news. I'm not surprised, though. I mean, it felt like the longer and longer that this dragged on, the more and more likely it was that Todd Monken was going to leave.
Yeah, I mean, look at what he did with Georgia's quarterback position. I think that's where it starts for me when I look back and when I think about what Todd Monken brought to Georgia. He had just a raw deal when it came to what Georgia had at quarterback, and some of that was self-imposed. He's admitted that. Kirby Smart's admitted that. They did everything they could to keep Stetson Bennett off the field, and maybe Stetson wasn't ready at the beginning. He was definitely ready by the end. But think about what happened. He comes into this new job during the COVID spring. You think Jamie Newman is going to be your guy up until he isn't right before the Arkansas game, it seems like. You've got Dwan Mathis, who was not ready for that moment. And then you have to go to Stetson Bennett. And then you have JT Daniels kind of battling in and out with his health and with his inconsistencies to stay healthy. And you never really feel settled in that role. Even in the 2021 national championship season, JT Daniels started that year and Stetson Bennett made the most of the opportunity when he had to do it. So if he can navigate all of those quarterback inconsistencies at Georgia, I don't know what this means for him with the Ravens as he takes the Baltimore job. We had a Ravens fan in here asking LW Aerial Productions, shout out to them. If we need any drone footage, we'll hit you up. But as a Ravens fan, what should you expect? You should expect that he learned a lot from a championship caliber college football team, which is different than the NFL. But Georgia runs its program as close to an NFL operation as you can. And presumably, if this means that Lamar Jackson is staying, I'm speculating here. But if I'm Todd Monken, I'm probably more likely to take the job if I have some reassurance that Lamar Jackson will be my quarterback. If Monken can get explosive production with a walk-on quarterback, I'd like to think that for the Ravens, he'll be able to dial it up with Lamar Jackson, but that's just me.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think what we saw in Todd Monken was a. I mean, it was ingenuity. I mean, he was creative with what he was doing, and I think that in the NFL you have so much more time to spend with these guys. College coaches are very limited. I mean, in terms of NCAA restrictions and stuff on how much time they can actually spend with these players. That's why a fall camp is so important. That's why bowl practices are so important. You don't have a lot of that in the NFL, and so to be able to work with guys that are completely all in on football, I think that he's going to be a very successful NFL offensive coordinator again. I mean, this isn't his first rodeo in the NFL, guys. There's a reason that he was attractive to Georgia, and there's a reason that he is once again attractive to the NFL, and it's because of the background that he has in coaching, both at both levels, and the success that he's had at both levels.
When you think back on Monken's career, Palmer, what game moment will you always be able to say, if not for Todd Monken, that doesn't happen? I know I'm putting you on the spot, so I'll answer first. For me, I think it's the Ohio State game. And I think that when you see what Georgia struggled with in years past, when Georgia was, let's run the ball first, let's run, let's be RBU. And that was great. I mean, Georgia had some really good backs doing that when you had Sony Michel and Nick Chubb. And I'm not taking anything away from James Cook, Zamir White, Kenny McIntosh, Kendall Milton, or anyone. But the offense changed. And you had an offense that could score, and not just score with anybody, but outscore anybody. And I don't know if offenses in years past are able to outshoot and just outpace a team like Ohio State on that field on that night when the defense didn't have its best stuff. So for me, I think that was the iconic Todd Monken game.
Yeah, I'll go. They didn't need to outpace them because the defense did play well in this one. But to me, the season opener against Oregon this year, you saw Georgia at full strength, which, we didn't see all that often because of A.D. Mitchell being injured and limited and such. But you saw Georgia at full strength, and they were clicking on all cylinders and more. I mean, that was one of the most impressive offensive performances. And really, I think that's when the Todd Monken buzz started to go. I mean, that and the South Carolina game, I think I wrote it after the South Carolina game because Jesse Simonton, who works with us at On3, covering the SEC and on the national side of things, he wrote something about Todd Monken as a coordinator and just the success that he was having after those two games and the offensive production that Georgia got in those two games against two Power 5 opponents, two teams that turned out to be pretty darn good. I mean, two top 25 caliber teams. Georgia made them look silly. And that is a testament to what Todd Monken was able to do with this group. And again, I go back to what I said previously. He got to spend a lot of time with this team in fall camp, got to spend a lot of time with them during the summer, when football was the only priority, when football was the only thing going on. And that's the kind of effort, the kind of offensive production that you saw in that game. I think that says a lot about what Todd Monken is and what he's capable of. And, we're talking about a game here that we probably wouldn't have seen without Todd Monken. I can certainly tell you one play, a play that we saw several times throughout Todd Monken's time in Athens that I hadn't seen all too often, at least with the frequency that we saw it. And that's handing the ball off to Brock Bowers. I hope that Mike Bobo continues to do that because it is exciting to watch Brock Bowers carry the football. I know Georgia fans are certainly hopeful of that as well because it's a It's a dynamic element to this offense that hasn't been there before, and isn't present with a lot of teams because they don't have the players to do it. Georgia has the players to do it, and they had the coach that was willing and capable of implementing it and willing to call it.
All right, so everyone's freaking out about Mike Bobo reportedly being the answer here. Our own Jake Rowe is working hard on getting all these stories up over at DawgsHQ.com. But he had a note that I thought was interesting, and this is a peek behind the curtain for our non-DawgsHQ premium subscribers. Not giving away too much here, but apparently Todd Monken did endorse Mike Bobo as his replacement. And that's not just, Jake Rowe reporting that. That's Todd Monken telling us that when he gave credit to Mike Bobo throughout the season. I mean, there were several touchdown drives and creative plays and moments where Monken said, hey, that was Mike Bobo's idea. So I don't know how much that matters to everyone in our comments section who's not happy about Mike Bobo coming back. But I do want to make a note of that.
People aren't happy about that, Wes?
People are not thrilled about it, Palmer. But no, I think that's an important thing to know. I mean, Monken's on his way out, and he didn't just dog Mike Bobo and say, y'all got to look at somebody else. Now, from the standpoint of timing, I do find it interesting that this is moving along so quickly. And I know that Georgia needs stability for recruiting, but it almost makes me wonder, tinfoil hat moment, did some of this delay happen because Georgia was also working behind the scenes to secure who Monken's replacement was going to be? Because you'd like to think that Georgia had a list of candidates, or maybe Kirby just knew all along it was going to be Bobo.
I don't know. Certainly some speculation there, because those are conversations that we're not privy to in the Buttsmere building. But I do think that they this is a situation that they were prepared for, and probably have been prepared for a while now. I mean, this is the kind of reason why you bring in somebody like Mike Bobo and the offensive minds around Todd Monken, even when Todd was on the staff. I mean, you had Buster Faulkner, who had OC experience. You bring in Mike Bobo, who has, head coach experience, OC experience, yada, 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 Georgia experience. You bring in Brian McClendon, who's got all that experience and more too. There's a reason you bring those guys in, even with Todd Monken on the staff. You want to create a culture in your program and an expectation of excellence. And so I do think that this is something that they have been prepared for. I don't know that the delay in terms of the Ravens announcing things, would have been because Georgia was waiting. I think that
no, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that, this timeline for Georgia I didn't phrase that properly. Maybe the timeline of, Monken deciding and the Ravens making their decision, maybe Georgia used that to its advantage in vetting its candidates, having a succession plan in place. Because, Buster Faulkner is a name that a lot of Georgia fans thought on our message board, in my friends' text threads, and our comments, if Monken's going to go, why go with Bobo, a quote-unquote retread, and why not look at Buster Faulkner, who you would think, maybe has a lot more time left in coaching and has more ahead of him in his coaching career. But I think, as you pointed out, the experience is hard to ignore when it comes down to Bobo versus Faulkner. And that's not taking anything away from what Faulkner can do or will do or is capable of. But I think Kirby Smart just knows that Bobo's been around the block longer. He's been in the conference longer. He's been a head coach. I mean, he's done all of it. He's checked all the boxes.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at Georgia's coaching staff, it's a name that is very familiar to a lot of these coaches. Worked with Will Muschamp, previously, worked with Kirby Smart. Those three guys, getting the band back together. Those three guys, they're very comfortable, and I think that's a good thing. I think when fans hear, oh, they're comfortable, well, that Kirby has kind of ingrained in everyone, you don't want to be comfortable. You don't want to be.
There's
complacent.
a difference between comfortable and complacent, right? And I don't think you ever have to worry about Kirby Smart being complacent. And I would say the day he is probably the day he'll leave the job.
Exactly. And that's kind of where I was going with this, is that, you've got to trust this guy who is wired this way, that he's going to make the right hire, that he's going to do what's best for the program. I think that it's surprising to some folks, but it's not all too surprising because of the relationship and, again, the experience. But I'm certainly excited to hear what Jake has to say here.
Yeah, Jake, welcome in. In case you haven't heard, Todd Monken took the Ravens job, and Mike Bobo is probably going to replace him. What do you think about that?
Man, I just woke up. I don't know how to process this. No, I mean, this is something that boulder started rolling downhill, I think, yesterday. Listen, I mean, Todd Monken wanted to go to the NFL. Not necessarily because he's trying to get out of Georgia. I think it's just mainly I think the man's 57 years old. I think he wants to spend his weekends at home and not hanging out with, most of the year, and not have to hang out with 15, 16, and 17-year-old kids, who are coming in town for junior days. And I get it. Not everybody's cut out for that. Some guys enjoy that part of it. I don't think he does. I think he wants to call plays and, go home, hang out with his wife, probably watch some Netflix, have a beer. That type of thing. But I will say this, Todd Monken leaving is not a big shock. The Ravens job was always the one to kind of keep an eye on. You over time, it's like no news is good news. You kind of feel good about Todd Monken staying, all that stuff. Ultimately, the hire of Mike Bobo, I think, had a lot to do with Todd Monken. From what I've heard, Todd Monken, I'll say on his way out the door, but probably wasn't quite like that, endorsed Mike Bobo heavily for this job. As I'm kind of piecing together information, listen, Todd Monken is the guy that got paid $2 million and some change to lead Georgia's offense last year. He deserves the credit. But I think if you were to catch Todd Monken in a candid moment, he's going to point to that guy right there and say, this guy helped us out a lot last year.
Well, Jake, which game was it? I brought it up, but I didn't know the specific. There was a game where Monken gave Bobo credit. He said, Bobo
LSU
drew up those first two touchdown drives or plays or whatever it was.
Yep, it was the LSU game. It was that. And, he spoke about it. He talked about how awesome of an experience it was, how Mike Bobo had kind of jumped into a servant leadership role there, where he was drawing up play cards and kind of doing stuff that GAs did, doing everything. I'm told Mike Bobo had a massive impact on third down last year, where Georgia was one of the best third down teams in the country. Mike Bobo had a big part in planning third down. A lot of info trickles out in these types of things. I think folks are trying to justify, and not necessarily justify, but I think folks are trying to help people understand why certain decisions are made. And Todd Monken heavily endorsed Mike Bobo for this job. I'm confident in that. I've heard that from more than one source at this point. Does that mean he's going to be a stud or be Andy Reid? No, probably not. But judging Mike Bobo on what happened at South Carolina or what happened at Auburn, I think is a little overboard. For better, no matter what you think of them, those offenses were better than they were the year before when he had them, and he had 1 year to work with them, and they were atrocious football teams that rosters had to be flipped. Coaches were let go in a year within 2 years of that time. Looking back, the best thing Brian Harsin ever did in his football career in the SEC was to, let Mike Bobo go, which I'm told was not as much of an underperformance thing as it was a non-mesh thing. And look at Brian Harsin and how hard it was to find an offensive coordinator for him after that. Harsin letting him go at Auburn opened the door for him to return to Georgia as an analyst. And after a year with Monken, that's the guy. But, listen, if Georgia wanted to go back and get Buster Faulkner, they would have went back and gotten Buster Faulkner. Kirby Smart wanted Mike Bobo. Mike Bobo came highly recommended. And, we'll see how it works out. I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is going to go great, because I don't want to be accused of coming on this show and trying to justify whatever prediction I made. But I think Mike Bobo is a really good offensive mind. You look at his career at Georgia, there were years where Georgia was basically 50-50 run pass with Aaron Murray. And then when Georgia had Todd Gurley, Nick Chubb, and Sony Michel, they ran it 65% of the time, because that's what you do when you have players like that. And I think Mike Bobo will be a better recruiter, and he was already really good. Missed on some quarterbacks, missed on quite a few quarterbacks. And that was one of the problems Georgia had later on. Let's call it what it is. He struggled at recruiting quarterbacks there for a good little stretch, and that hurt Georgia. He's behind the wheel of a completely different machine now.
So when you look at I was just going to look at what Georgia did from a passing standpoint. I mean, up until this past season, Bobo's offenses that you mentioned, Jake, 2012 and 2013, were two of the best passing offenses that Georgia ever had, with 4,085 yards in 2013 and 3,991 in 2012. And, you know, I had a podcast with DJ Shockley during the pandemic, and you might not know it, but DJ Shockley loved Mike Bobo, and the impact that he had on guys. You know, you're going to look at some of the recruiting misses that he had. He also had some of the best quarterbacks that Georgia's ever had. So you're going to have to reconcile that as well. Sorry for cutting you off, Palmer.
No, I was just going to add, and Jake said it, but the talent that he's going to be working with, even compared to those those early 2010 era Georgia teams, and the previous time that he spent in Athens and around the SEC, this is hands down, no doubt, the most talent that Mike Bobo is going to be working with. I mean, I'm not wrong in saying that, right?
No,
you're not.
And I would like to point this out too. The same thing was said about Brian Schottenheimer, right? That didn't work out, right? But let's be honest. I mean, once Nick Chubb got hurt, Brian Schottenheimer didn't have a whole lot to work with in Athens. Malcolm Mitchell, Sony Michel, and that was about it. But the deal is that Mike Bobo doesn't come to Georgia as some offensive coordinator that struggled at Georgia. He did a really good job. He left Georgia on good terms, just like Todd Monken's doing. I think more than anything, what's going to happen here for the naysayers is it's going to remind Georgia of a time gone by that wasn't very fun. But I'll say this, and I posted this on Twitter. Y'all, when Mike Bobo left Georgia at the 2014 season, Jay Roos and I stood right side by side when the news broke, and we said, man, it feels like something bad's happening at Georgia because Mike Bobo is leaving. And the program came unraveled. It just did. The program flat out came unraveled.
I want to address what the naysayers are talking about because that's what's happening in our comment section. Jake Crow had to go pick up a pizza, I think.
Well, actually, no, I've got somebody here to fix my dishwasher, guys. So I'm
great.
Get out of here. This thing hadn't been working for a week. We need our dishwasher back. So the Frigidaire repairman is here. I'll have to see you guys later on.
All right. There you go.
Wes, I'm going to bring one thing up real quick and wish we could have gotten Jake's perspective. I know this will be something.
We'll talk about this ad nauseum on the Georgia show tomorrow night.
You know, the biggest question that I've got with this is, what does this do to Georgia's quarterback competition? Does this completely even the playing field for those three contenders, Carson Beck, Brock Vandagriff, Gunnar Stockton? I mean, you would think that it does, because one of the biggest advantages that Carson had over Brock is he had another year of experience in Todd Monken's offense. He was hands down the most experienced in terms of how much time he had spent there. So I guess the question is, how different is this offense going to be from the one that they were running? We won't know that until they play. I mean, we won't even know that when they play. Who do they open? UT Martin?
Yeah, UT Martin. So, yeah, I think the system stuff, the scheme stuff is going to be an unknown. I don't expect Mike Bobo is just going to come in and blow up what Todd Monken's been doing, because he had all season to see, hey, this stuff works. And by the way, Georgia was not going to run the exact same offense in 2023, even if Monken came back. I mean, we've seen how much Georgia diversifies. Georgia changes what it does to keep people guessing. So there was going to be a reinvention process one way or another. I'll grant everyone's concern, though. We're not going to sit here gaslight you, tell you that you're crazy for thinking this is a bad move or a move that could potentially set Georgia back. I understand that. I get it. You had an offensive coordinator who had Brock Bowers and Stetson Bennett for the last 2 seasons and knew how to use them. That's the bottom line. You knew how to use a really talented guy. I think if it's any consolation, you can take what Mike Bobo did in years past that you didn't like and frustrated you, and you can have that in one box. But in the pros list, all right, if we're making a pros and cons list, a big pro for Mike Bobo joining this offensive staff and leading it is that he saw how this cake was made for the last entire season. And he saw what Todd Monken did. Mike Bobo is going to bring his own coaching style. Okay. He's a different human being than Todd Monken is. You're not going to get a carbon copy there. But when it comes to concepts, this isn't Mike Bobo's first big time offensive coordinator job. He's been there and he's seen how this is made. But I'm not going to sit here and tell y'all that y'all are crazy for thinking that Mike Bobo could not be the best potential outcome. You're allowed to think that, and I understand why you think that.
And ultimately, you know, Georgia fans that think this is a step back to bring Bobo, to bring Bobo back into Athens, back into this position. There's just not many people like Todd Monken. I mean, the man. I started this by saying it, and feels like we're wrapping up here. But so I'll end my thought here saying this. He was highly sought after by colleges as a head coach, by pros as a coordinator, on down the line. He was highly sought after because he was an exceptional head coach, an exceptional offensive mind, an exceptional coordinator. There's not many like that, and so you're not going to say bye Todd Monken and bring in somebody that's a better offensive mind than him, because there might not be one. I mean, he might have been the best offensive mind in college football this past season, certainly as a coordinator. I mean, there's just not many minds. There's not many names out there that you can bring in that would have made people ecstatic to see Todd Monken leave and think, oh, we're going to be just okay, if not better. You're watching a guy leave because he's had success. This isn't a James Coley situation where Georgia was replacing somebody and trying to go out and get somebody because they needed to create more success. They've had that success under Todd Monken. And so when you're making a change, it's going to be met with some fear, some concern. So, that's kind of my overarching thought is, the reason people are concerned may not even be because Mike Bobo was a play caller in 2014 at Georgia, and they weren't happy with his predictability or whatever. It's probably because Todd Monken was a really damn good one, and that's hard to replace, regardless of who's replacing him.
Yep, great call, Palmer. On the flip side of that, you want to talk about fear and replacing somebody. Think about what Kirby Smart thinks, and think about how important his culture is to his program. Would you want to bring someone in who is brand new off the street? You got to train them up. It's like any job. Or would you bring someone in? I mean, time is money. You don't have to sit there and explain, whether it's by, sitting down in a meeting and saying, this is what our culture is like, this is what it's like, or by letting them sit there and soak it all in. Mike Bobo's already seen it all, and he knows what it's all about, and he knows how it runs.
And Wes, they start spring practice 1 month from today. It's not like you had a ton of time to go out and get, to do an extensive search. Again, this is something that they've been prepared for. No, probably not just this offseason. They probably had this thought, and it's probably part of the reason why they brought in Mike Bobo when they did bring him in an analyst role. They knew this was going to happen at some point. Todd Monken wasn't going to just spend the rest of his days in Athens. They were prepared for that, prepared for this. And it's, yeah.
I did want to answer one question. Our comments have fired off so much, I can't find it now. I'd love to pull it up. But someone asked, I wonder what this means for Deuce Robinson, the highly touted tight end prospect out of Arizona. And I asked our recruiting insider, Jake Roos. Thank you, Palmer. I asked our recruiting insider, Jake Roos, that very question. I just texted him, and he said that it doesn't impact Deuce Robinson's decision at all. So take that for what it's worth. I take it to be worth a lot. He said if Todd Hartley were the guy leaving, then he would say differently. But Todd Hartley is the guy who's running that show. Speaking of shows, we'll be back on the Georgia show tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We do that every Wednesday night. We do it every Sunday night at the same time. And we also do a show called Bark After Dark every Monday at 9, which is a little bit different, a little bit behind the scenes of how we do this job and speaking to people who also do it. But the show that is of immediate interest for you, where we will have Jake Rowe and Jake Roos and Palmer and myself after some time to digest this news and look at all the stats and wrap our minds around it. We'll talk about Todd Monken's departure. We'll talk about Mike Bobo coming in, what it means for recruits, what it means for the quarterback position, and what it means for Georgia in 2023 and beyond. So y'all hit like, hit subscribe on this channel if you've enjoyed what we're talking about here. And Ravens fans too. We've had a couple Ravens fans in the comments. Y'all tune into that. I know this is a Georgia show, but we'll educate you a little bit on what you can expect from Todd Monken. We know better than anybody else because we've seen him do it for the past 3 seasons. Appreciate y'all joining us. Palmer, have a safe trip back. Watch out for crazy drivers. There's a lot of them out there, man. We'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.